In summer 2021, I have extensively started using the feature many phones today offer, TimeLapse. It was an intriguing tool to document various aspects of my traveling, exploring, and elements of the nature, such as clouds moving or snails vibing around the grass. However, it was only a glimpse of what a time-lapse can offer, and as much as it has proven to have given me a great head start once I started approaching it more seriously, it was limited in its technological and aesthetic merit. When starting my research, it was quite difficult to dig out references that weren't travel vlogs because they're not really flushed out subject one talks about, but luckily throughout time several films popped out as good examples. Possibly the first one is Clockwork Orange's sex scene. Another one would be Martin Scorsese's Hugo, Netflix's Giant on the Beach from Sex, Death and Robot series, and I Lost My Body, a 2019 French adult animated film directed by Jeremy Clapin. But possibly the most famous one is with a remake truly resembling the timeless time-lapses I pursued making. First step forward was downloading TimeLapse, an app that allowed me to set the number of frames, interval between them, and the duration of the final export. It was a handy tool due to it still being a part of a device that I always have with me, my phone. But as all journeys go, I had to continue onward. I have transferred for a short while onto the GoPro 4 that I rented from the university's media loan hub, but was soon underwhelmed with its capacity to broaden my understanding of the subject. It didn't have the option of setting camera settings to do individual photographs, but rather, just like the phone did, it captured the footage and then sped it up. Possibly my favorite tool that I have used was GoPro Hero 6, which not only had a better design, it was also quite flexible in terms of what kind of a time-lapse I can shoot. Alongside standard video time-lapse, it also had the option of time-lapse photography for both night and day. Revolutionary aspect that this brought was having individual pictures shot at a relatively custom intervals, and in night lapses it also had the option of setting the shutter speed. The reason that is important is that once I have entered the post-production process, I had bigger control over certain light changes, and the pictures had reasonably high quality exports. The downfall to it was GoPro's specific aspect ratio, which makes it quite limited when applying it to non-conforming formats. The second one was the width of GoPro's lenses, which sometimes made the composition rather dull, and the ability to change focus was both limiting and constraining in a sense that I could count on the sharpness of the image. However, I didn't have the control over the depth of field. My favorite feature, however, is that due to its size, it is easy to hide and then go away. That is something that has proven useful when wanting to observe animal behavior. Another device that I have used is something I have already owned, a camcorder. At first, I didn't know it had a time-lapse option, so the videos I had taken I had to speed up to 6,000 times. I find it extremely good for what you can expect from a camcorder because it gives you control over intervals and immediately shows you the end result, which, all things taken in consideration, is quite decent. Wanting to up my visual quality game, I rented out a Red Weapon, which is a high-end camera, and as such gives a tremendous amount of freedom when it comes to artistically framing a shot. Since you can use any Canon lens, it gave me the ability to shoot sunrises and sunsets with telephoto lenses, which makes them look more spectacular from when they are shot on a wider type of lens. What I have learned is that if I were to use an ND filter, I might have gotten even better results. It having a built-in time-lapse feature, it makes it quite intuitive, but the amount of battery it is using to operate makes it hard to have it work for a prolonged amount of time, which is often a demand for a time-lapse. In my experience of using it, I have not dealt with the frame rate properly, hence all my material is quite quick and I am left without a maneuverable space where I can slow it down. Before I used Canon 60D, I had to buy an intervalometer with an appropriate plug, which at 15 quid was a very cheap investment but one worthwhile. It really opened my eyes as to what the time-lapse is about and how one goes about it. Overall battery life allowed me to shoot for long periods of time, and with great control over the intervals and the amount of frames, it fueled me with confidence when setting up a shot. Biggest drawback which comes from my lack of experience in general photography is that I have used lenses with too high apertures, therefore I have not been able to produce night lapses that I am satisfied with. I also shot in RAW, which allowed me to be really precise when color grading. Something that I need to work on is my understanding of exposures, because I didn't know how to program a camera to adjust the exposure naturally, and if I were to make it and have an automatic one, my material would contain a lot of flicker, I ended up with footage that either became black or white, depending on if it were shot on sunrise or sunset time. Before I get to the post-production process, I want to mention that I tried including motion in my time lapses by using SERP slider that was given to me by the lecturer. And as much as I've seen it being used extensively by the professionals, I'm not completely sold on it just yet, because I think I need to nurture my time-lapse skills more to know how to properly utilize the movement in my final work. Post-production was initially putting photographs in Photoshop and exporting them as a sequence, which was a great insight into how some of my material turned out. It was simple and effective, but the creative process that time-lapse demands wasn't completely compliant with how this particular software worked. I have therefore transferred to editing my photos in Lightroom, which has all of the same things one needs to bring the quality of a picture to a higher level. It was my first time working on it, and for the sake of experimenting and accenting certain features time-lapse can offer, I have sometimes gone too far in contrast or saturation. Possibly my favorite feature on it was the ability to mask the photos, which enabled me to grade two or more different areas of a photo separately. Then I would export the photos and import them into Adobe's After Effects as a sequence. For what I needed the program for, it was quite straightforward. However, I did encounter some of the footage have missing frames, especially if shot on GoPro between day and night or vice versa. The reason for that is that its sensor wasn't quick enough to capture the info, damaging the files on the micro SD card that GoPro operates with. Because of its lengthy procedure to finally reveal what has been captured, time-lapse photography reminded me of analog photography, where it takes a while to develop photos to their final stage. The latter segment and some of the previous ones were highly reinforced or clarified by the future filmmakers' course, whose videos I'm still watching. In my future endeavors, I would download LR TimeLapse, which from what I have gathered is an extension of Lightroom and is widely used by TimeLapse as being a software specifically designed to deal with flicker, light changes and frame control. All important aspects to think about when producing a high quality time-lapse. From this particular period that I have studied, I have two regrets that are falling into the same category, and that is shooting a time-lapse over the period of multiple days or weeks. I really wanted to capture a plant growing, and very early on I was sad that I couldn't capture the leaves turning red and orange in autumn, eventually falling down. At the time I didn't have the resources and knowledge necessary to produce it in an appropriate manner. Something I will be further exploring, which I have managed to capture briefly with my friend's iPhone 12, is hyperlapse. That is when a camera moves for each frame, giving a very interesting movement and the ability to travel through space in a quite erratic fashion. One day I'd like to be a director, so I had to ask myself, why time lapses? Beside the opportunity to present the passage of time in an effective way or to map out a certain area for the audience, it also gives me an opportunity in real life to examine blocking. I've had several occasions where I was taking time lapses of social interactions, which then pinpointed something that completely misses our normal speed's eyesight, so to speak. You can see who is wiggly, who is isolated, who talks to who, and I believe I will be able to utilize this in the preparations with actors to see the nature of their interaction just on a physical level. If I were a cinematographer, on the other hand, when scouting a location, time-lapse would prove useful to examine how the environment and light changes during the day. All in all, I am quite satisfied with my progress in this area, and even though I don't believe I have reached a professional level, I have definitely grasped the rules that need to be followed when approaching time-lapse as a form of expressing the passage of time, and I'm very glad to say that I enjoyed this learning process very much.